Welcome, Grace and Peace Church. It's great to be gathering with you wherever you're finding yourself this morning, at home, on the couch, whether you're meeting with friends or family. Thanks for joining us another week for our Sunday service online. We understand the past few weeks have been a little bit out of the ordinary, to say the least. And so we're grateful for you joining us. And we hope that this can be a fruitful time of just hearing God's word, doing worship in a slightly different way, and more importantly, connecting as a community in the best ways we can for the season that we're in. Of course, we wish and we long to gather again in person, but we're recognizing that right now the beneficial thing is to meet separately, and being at that as it may, we're grateful to be here, and we're excited to share this community with you. What we're going to do now is something a little bit different than what we typically do for worship. Instead of doing a set of songs with the scriptures like we're used to doing, we're recognizing that in this format, that doesn't always translate. It's one thing when we do worship that way in person and in the service, but trying to figure out how best to use this online medium. And so what we're going to do now is more like an online meditation. It's actually a style of reading scripture that's called Lectio Divina, and that's Latin for divine reading. Don't think too heavy into that. Basically, it's just thoughtfully and intentionally reading scripture and having an awareness of God's presence. So what we'll do is I'll guide us through a little bit of a short breathing exercise, and then I'll read the scripture. And as I'm reading, the idea is to help ourselves get grounded and centered around God's presence, recognizing that God is present with us wherever we find ourselves, that God's presence isn't just allocated to the church, but that God is present with you right now in the spaces you find yourself today. So this is less of maybe normally how we think of prayer as offering things up to God, and this is more just kind of becoming comfortable with God's presence all around us and leaning into that today. So before I read, let's just take a moment and do some breathing. So find a comfortable place. If you're in your homes and you're tired of sitting on the couch, feel free to get up and move around. If you want to lay down, if you want to kneel, if you want to stand up, if you want to do some stretching while we're doing this, all of that falls under the umbrella of worship, which is just intentionally acknowledging and responding to God's presence. And so I invite you, as we're breathing and as we're reading, to find a comfortable place where we can just sit and acknowledge God's presence. All right, so once you've found a comfortable spot, why don't you go ahead and close your eyes and just breathe with me. So breathe in, hold it for a little bit, and breathe out. One more time, breathe in. And breathe out. These aren't like forced breaths, just breathe naturally, but breathe deeply. So one more time, breathe in. Breathe out. As we breathe in, acknowledging God's Spirit with us. The word spirit means breath. So with every breath in, we're taking in God's Spirit. And when we breathe out, we're breathing out grace. We're breathing out mercy. If you want to keep your eyes closed, you're welcome to do that. Go ahead and keep breathing. And this is Psalm 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So with that spirit of gratitude and recognizing God's goodness, we're going to sing. And again, you can just sit with your eyes closed if you want to just listen and just kind of take in what's happening. If you want to respond, however God's Spirit is moving in you now. As we breathe in God's grace, we respond with praise and with singing. Lord, we recognize your goodness in this place. That in you, we lack nothing. You anoint us and our cup overflows, Lord. Holy Spirit, come and breathe on us. We sing to you. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, worship your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, worship your holy name. You're
We are in a sermon series called Common Ground, and so we're gonna be in Mark chapter 10, verses 35 to 45. So if you want to hit pause right now, break out your Bible, get your phone out. If you don't have a Bible, you can look up YouVersion app, Bible app on your phone, and track along with us. So if you want to hit pause right now and find that, get yourself ready. We're gonna dig into it. So recently, one of the beautiful things I get to experience as a parent of two daughters that are now getting taller and bigger as far as weight is that they can now sit in the front seat in my truck. Well, at least Kai can. Malia can't, but Kai can. And it's been amazing just to watch a little human go from little tiny human to now being able to sit in the front seat. And she is ecstatic to be able to sit in the front seat. So every now and then, I don't always let her, but every now and then she'll ask me like, hey, can I sit up front? And I let her do that. And I can just tell she's just like on cloud nine, sitting in the front seat with dad, and Malia's in the back seat. Kind of unfortunate, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But now that she's 4 feet 9 inches, she is able to be in that shotgun seat. And I don't know if you remember, maybe in high school, calling shotgun, that was like the prestigious seat in a vehicle. I understand why it's so good. You're in the front seat. You can see a little bit better. It's a seat of privilege, right? We all desire it. And so I just remember high school, it was just like the thing that we would always call. And there was rules about how that worked, right? You had to call it, I think, within sight of the vehicle. There was always little specifics that went into that one. But nonetheless, you probably remember, and maybe you're taking it for granted now that you're in the driver's seat, the fact that it's beautiful to be up front row. Great seating, no matter where you're at. Maybe it's even concerts. There's something prime about that, right? This passage that we're going to be looking at right now talks about some prime seating. So let's dig into it. We're in Mark chapter 10 in verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Which already, bold statement. We want you to do whatever we ask. That's pretty bold to come to Jesus and say that. So he says, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, of course. They're like, oh yeah, we're totally in on this, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at the right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard this, they became indignant with James and John, instantly jealous. And Jesus called them all together and said, learning opportunity, let's talk about this. You know those who regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must become servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Let's pray as we move further into this passage and as we unpack it. Father, we want to learn from you in this time. We want to begin to hear your heart for our lives as we find ourselves in this cultural moment of kind of chaos and scenarios that we never imagined. And so we want to come before you and learn and see what these passages have to say to us today and how we can begin to live this out in beautiful ways. So may your Spirit guide and lead us as we sit with this passage. We love you, Jesus, and we pray this in your name. Amen. So the disciples are jealous because James and John come to Jesus with this request, this really big request, that we want the prime seating. We want special seating with you, Jesus, which we can get that their heart is to draw closer to Jesus, right? That they recognize that he's king and that he has this the seat of the throne seat, basically. And they want to be on the right and left. And the special seating desire, I think we can relate to. But what Jesus does is he comes back with this response of really how we should approach seating, if you will. And so they want to be these honored guests basically at the table. And if we want to think about what they're requesting, the seating that they're requesting around the table, in terms of the culture at that time, the best seats were reserved at the right and left. That was a cultural norm that those who were closest to the king would be in those seats reserved at the right and left, and the others would then kind of trickle around the rest of the table. And so for them, yeah, the heart was right, but Jesus corrects their vision a little bit about who the king is and how he operates, because that was the cultural norm. But what Jesus brings is a kingdom norm, right? A kingdom way of viewing things. And it's completely different. And it's interesting to really think about this, because what Jesus says in the end in verse 45, he says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." So even Jesus says, I'm not the one in the super prime seating. He's like, I'm the one that's going to take the position of a servant, the one that's serving everybody at this table. And what's beautiful is that Jesus, in the middle of that, is still saying, I want to have a meal with you. I invite you to this table. I want to be a part of it. He doesn't discredit the fact that he is king, doesn't in any way change that, but he changes the approach of how this king serves and his heart for his disciples and how he calls us to follow in his footsteps. All right, so in Revelation 3:20, it says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." So Jesus understands this idea of being at a table, but he turns it to where he says, I want to come and eat with you. That even though he's king, even though that he is God in flesh and blood, he models for us this humility. And it's not like a false humility. It's a humility that says, no, I want to knock on your door. I'm not going to come barging in. I'm not going to force my kingly power on anybody. I'm going to come in a way that's humble. And we see that in Revelation 3:20. I'm going to knock on the door, and if you welcome me in, I'll come and eat with you. And that's a reminder that, man, we have to continually make this choice. Do we follow Christ? Do we surrender our lives and just say, hey, we want to invite you into what we're doing, and we want to eat at this table that, man, he actually ultimately invites us to, right? So Jesus calls them in this way to be servants, to not come at this thing with authority, but in a way that says, no, there's authority there that's given by the Father, by God, but we're going to come in with humility. And so what I want to show us in the middle of this passage where we see James and John just looking for authority, that Jesus calls them to come in with this term that I want to continually remind ourselves of, is this idea of a non-anxious presence. And this is the heartbeat. This is kind of the flow of where Jesus goes with this. And this term, this non-anxious presence, comes from Edward Howard Freeman. And he was an ordained rabbi, family therapist, and a leadership consultant who coined this phrase. And in a world where we have all the control, right? Picture your cell phone. We can literally ask any question and pretty much get the answers. It may not always be right, but we can get answers pretty quickly, right? We don't ever go not knowing something for very long. And even the things that we desire, maybe food, those are at our fingertips. We can literally just get DoorDash right now, any moment we want food, it comes to us. If there's something that we want materially, we can order it up on Amazon instantly. It gives us this sense of authority, this sense of power, this sense that kind of what James and John were looking for, this earthly power, this ability to control situations, the ability to have the best seat that's available. It's at our fingertips constantly. And what some claim is that our brains are being completely rewired, that we're being rewired to be in control of all things at all times. And we all know that that's ultimately not true, that we really don't have that. It's just maybe a false sense. But we get so wired to thinking that we can have that. Even entertainment, it's at our fingertips constantly. And so the sense of control, that when things are chaotic, maybe this current cultural moment where things aren't the way that we want them to be, we're not at our typical, the job routine that we have. So some of you are parents and you have kids at home, and so you're playing the role of your current job as well as parent/teacher, and trying to balance all of that. Maybe the routine that you've had has been completely thrown off because you're in quarantine, you're not able to leave. There's a lot of control that's been given up, and for probably good reason. It causes a lot of anxiety in us because we've been so formed to be in control. And I think what we see in this passage with James and John wanting that control, wanting the prestigious seat, we can have a lot to learn, that maybe we need to begin to take the seat of a servant the way that Jesus calls him to. That as a servant, we can come into the situation looking for ways to not only be served and to have this place of prestige, but a place of saying, what are the needs around me? Who are the people around me that might need help, that might need someone to go get groceries for them? How can we begin to change our posture to not desiring the seats of prestige, but the seat of a servant? Jesus says in a very countercultural way that he wants to bring peace, but he says it in John 14:27. He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you peace as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." He says, I don't give as the way the world does. And that's what James and John understood, and that's what they've been trained. Their culture has taught them to watch out for number one and get the best seat possible, right? But what Jesus says is like, I'm going to bring you peace, and I'm going to bring you a way of being comfortable in the midst of chaos, in the midst of your lack of control, that will bring you peace beyond understanding. And he says, you don't have to be afraid. Don't be troubled. Like, this way of living that I want to give you is really, really good. And so the posture that Jesus calls James and John to, and ultimately the other 10 disciples that are sitting there jealous, is this posture of humility, the posture that Jesus models for us. His humility was one that had power, right? Because clearly there was a lot of people listening to his teaching and seeing the impact and seeing how it was transforming their lives. These 12 disciples wouldn't be following him if it wasn't transforming their lives in really good, tangible ways. Jesus would be the first one to say, if there's a better way, take it. But what he brings is this way of living that brings peace, that brings wholeness. And so what we need to do is just begin to come underneath him and trust that he has a bigger view of what's going on. The other 10, in verse 41, they get jealous, right? So you see where these 10 hear about what James and John have done, and they're like, what did Jesus do? What's going on? So Jesus turns it into a teaching moment. But their jealousy is very real, because I know that, going back to the illustration of Kylan sitting in the front seat with me in my truck, has an impact, because I know that Malia sits in the back seat, and sometimes I can just see that she's jealous, that she's like, what? Why don't I get to sit in the front seat? I'm like, because you're still 4'1". Kai's 4'9". The rule is you have to be 4'9" to sit up in the front seat. But in reality, her perspective is like, well, come on, what's the difference? It's a few inches. It's not a big deal. And I think it's kind of the same way these disciples, where they just get frustrated and they're jealous of these guys that are trying to get better seating. But what we see and I know what Malia is like, her thought process, and I've heard her say this, she's like, why can't I be part of that? Like, why can't I get this seat of privilege? And I try and explain it to her, and it doesn't really work, because the reasoning and the understanding that I have, that our government has, and the rules they put on us of a certain size, it makes you safer in the front seat. The seatbelt actually makes it across your chest, so it's a little safer. But I try and explain those things to her, and it just goes over her head. And she's like, what? Seatbelt, what? It doesn't matter, right? either way, I don't get to be in the front seat and hang out with you guys. And so there's that jealousy that's just going to continue to happen. And then the second part of what her thought process is usually that now she's alone in the back seat because Kylan's abandoned her and gone to the front seat, the seat of prestige. And I begin to think about that and how maybe there's parts of our lives where we take the seat of prestige. We take the better seat, right? And in that process, someone else is left out. Someone else is left in the back seat. And I think that a lot of times we think that we deserve a certain seat. We think we deserve a certain position in life, that there's certain things that we have to have, right? I think that's where James and John were, that they deserved a certain level of prestige because of who they were and because of how close they were to Jesus. But Jesus flips that on its head, right? He reverses it and says, no, we're going to be servants. And in that process of taking the front seat, we might be leaving people behind. And I don't want people alone in the back seat. And so what can we do to begin to be people who say, no, I'm gonna serve. I want to be a servant towards others because I know that it's good for them and not just me. And that in that process that we begin to learn what it means to have that humility that then begins to transform not only us, but then also the people around us. I know right now in this time of social distancing, I know that can be frustrating. I know that can be something that if you look at it from a selfish perspective, that, man, I want to go outside. I want to be able to go and do what I want whenever I want. But in this time of saying, no, we're going to keep distance out of being respectful for the other people in our community, the elderly, maybe those that are have compromised immune systems, that is the better thing and the loving thing to do for our community, is to spend time distancing and creating that space, because it is the loving thing. And so thinking through what that looks like to maybe take the backseat and join in with other people in that process can be really life-giving for others. And that can be a reflection of God's heart. Again, when Jesus talks about being a servant, that it reflects God's heart into our community as we live that out and as we begin to be people who live out what it means to be a servant. And so I want to challenge us with two things, two questions that can leave us chewing this week as we go into our life groups and as we spend time, I think, thinking through our faith and how we begin to practically live this out. First part being, we often think about like what table we can be invited into, but what if we begin to shift our mindset and begin to say, who are the people around me that can be invited into to the table with us? Who can we maybe video chat with? Who can we begin to see needs? How do I phrase that? Who can we begin to reach out to and begin to be a blessing for, right? I've heard of people going on Nextdoor and seeing needs around their immediate neighborhood and going and trying to help and meet those needs. That if there's people that are shut in, that can't leave their home and are freaked out in this time, understandably, that people are going in and just actually getting groceries for them. That's amazing. That's being a servant. That's saying, I'm not going to take the seat of prestige and just sit back and do my own thing and make sure I got my stockpile of toilet paper, but make sure that my neighbor has some as well. And that's such a beautiful illustration, such a beautiful example of what it means to be this kind of life-giving community that transforms the world that we live in. And the second part of that is recognize that we all have influence. Whether you like it or not, you have influence, you have skills, abilities that can be used for the kingdom, that can be used to reflect the heart of God where we live. And so what are some life-giving ways you've seen people act in the middle of this cultural moment? I give you one example, but maybe if you can comment below, share it at your life group, share the stories and the things that you're seeing that are transforming our community in the middle of what can seem like chaos, right? What are the ways that we can begin to be light in the midst of darkness? What are the ways that you've seen it? Maybe you've seen it on the news. Maybe you've had a friend, coworker, somebody that you know that has done something just amazingly beautiful to be a blessing to others and to begin to not take the seat of prestige, but take the seat of a servant. And so we want to continue to live into that. So bless you as you continue to live into this week and find opportunities to live into that. We'll keep you guys updated on ways to connect with Life Group. If you know others that want to be a part of that, this is an opportunity to invite others into that. We'll give you guys the link. You guys can share, invite other people, and get into some beautiful discussion about what Jesus is calling us to. So let's begin to look for opportunities to serve and be servants in the middle of it. Grace and peace to you. Welcome, Grace and Peace Church. Good to be online with you guys. And wherever you're at, if it's a morning, afternoon, evening, thank you for being with us and continuing to grow with us in this season. We want to give you a couple of updates on what's happening and how we're going to continue to move forward as a church. We're going to continue to be the church. These walls are not the church. You and I and all of us that continue to gather and keep engaged in God's word and continue to live this out in our community, that is the church, God living in us and through us. And so some ways that we're going to continue to do that is through life groups during the week. It's just going to be online. So we're using Zoom to do that. Your leaders will send you a link, and that link isn't meant just for you. If this is something that you believe somebody else should hear, if you know there's somebody else that would just love to get into some time of discussion, some time of prayer, getting into God's word, share that link with somebody else. We want to invite you to be reaching out. It's a great opportunity in this season to share that with others that are just stuck at home, that are locked in, and this could be a great way to engage. So take that opportunity. Sundays are going to continue to be this way. We're going to be online. We'll be posting these Sunday. Obviously, we're pre-recording these, but it'll be posted Sunday, and just we're going to take that discussion that we have from the Sunday sermon and continue that into our life groups. Continue to just be in prayer for our community. Continue to pray for your neighbors, for those around you, that we can continue to be a light in the midst of what can seem like chaos for a lot of people. And so join us in that. And if you want to just keep updated with what's happening, graceandpeacechurch.org. And if you need to connect with us, feel free to reach out. We're here to serve. And if there's ways that we can be serving you or the people around you that you know, let us know. We'd love to be a part of that. So grace and peace to you.